welcome. Thank you for coming to the US EMS Partner Community Call for February 2017. We are thrilled to have you here today, and we've got a great lineup of speakers. And so, just to get a few community housekeeping things out of the way, we will do that, and then we will get right on to our speakers. And this is just a really fantastic topic. Before we start, I do want to remind you, as always, that this call is being recorded on behalf of Microsoft. You are in a listen-only mode, but I do need to make you aware of that. If you need to interact with us today, you have a chat window down in the lower left-hand corner of your browser. You can post any questions or feedback for us or for our speakers as a part of that chat window, and we will do our best to respond to each and every one of those. If we get a lot of questions, which we frequently do from this group, we will do what we always do and use our Yammer group as a place to follow up with those questions after the call. So before we jump to our speakers, just a couple of housekeeping items that I really want you to be aware of. This is a really great set of information for you as partners. Microsoft Inspire, this is coming up. It's actually coming up really fast. Folks, don't miss out. This sold out last year. And when it's sold out completely. There are no secret passes. You can't call me up and say, hey, I need that special code to get me in there, even though you say it's full. It is full. And we did have to have some partners who miss it last year. And so we don't want you to miss it. So make sure that you get signed up for Inspire early and often. Bring your teams to that. So you are here, you know about the U.S. Enterprise Mobility and Security community, but we are more than just a community call. We actually have a Yammer group. I want you to take special note of that because in the following slides, I'm going to tell you to go to Yammer 4 different times. So if you're not signed up for our Yammer group, that is open to all partners. It is aka.ms/US EMS Yammer, and we will talk about that here a little bit more in a moment. And then we also have a blog. We regularly post updates about new technologies and new things that matter to you as partners. So make sure you're following our blog as well. So some key updates I want you to be aware of, giving you as partners who took the time to join us today a little bit of behind-the-scenes information. First and foremost, you've probably been familiar with the EMS Everywhere program. This is that one-day pre-sales funded opportunity for you as a partner to go out and engage your customer, walk through a proof-of-concept discussion and some of the key tenets of the EMS technologies, and really sort of end that day with some strong action items and results to deliver to your customer. We have secured additional funding for the rest of FY17 for that, so there is money still available. I know sometimes those buckets run out. We've got more funding that has been made available because EMS is a hot topic. There are also going to be new sets of content and some training videos that are going to launch next week. So I'm giving you a sneak preview today. You're probably going to see those next Monday or Tuesday. They'll be hitting our site. So when that does, we will make an announcement via the Yammer group. I just told you about that, and we will make sure that comes. So special thanks to Dave Gifford, one of our community members and Microsoft team members who's been driving hard to get you guys the updates in your hands on that. We also have some upcoming training events. We've actually got 4 of those I want to talk to you today about, just real briefly. One is a one-day pre-sales training event. And this event is going to be coming to, right now we're doing 5 cities, so it's kind of a pilot program in the month of March. I will be making the official announcement today on Yammer, so be watching the Yammer group today especially for the registration links. These are going to be smaller groups. They're limited in space because it's a pilot program. We want it to be a really engaging, exciting opportunity for you to come and not just look at slides all day, right? We're going to do a lot of activities that are going to help you learn how to make that pitch. So if it's you or some of your teammates that you want to send to join us at that training, be looking for that announcement today. In that same vein, we're also going to be doing a sort of a pilot run of a 3-day technical training. This is sort of a go from level 100 to 200 to 300 on the EMS stack. So if you're familiar with EMS at a deep level, this may not be for you, right? But if you've got some people in your world, or if you're just getting into the EMS space, we are going to be offering this in 3 cities coming up in the month of March around the U.S. Again, the official announcement will be made later today, so you'll be able to get signed up for that. Space will be limited. There's no cost to attend the training, other than if you choose to travel for it, but space will be limited, so don't miss out on that. And then 2 webinars I want to make you aware of. One is going to be about how to successfully deliver an Intune and EMS proof of concept. Based on some of the folks at Microsoft that have done some of these, they want to get you an opportunity to learn about how to scope it and really how do you engage and build those best practices. That is coming up in a month from today, actually. Well, yeah, a month from today, March 23rd, and that's going to be from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Time. So here's the trick. That is also the same day as our next community call. So you actually get to go join that webinar and then join the community call right after it. We didn't schedule them at the same time. They're at different times, but you're going to get a whole morning of EMS learning that day. So take advantage of that. You're going to get to hear from some Microsoft experts. So if you're doing EMS and Intune proof of concept, that's a good webinar to be in. The next one is Cloud App Security. There's going to be a webinar from our product team, and they're going to have 2 options to attend on March 29th, either in the morning or the afternoon. And they're basically going to give you the latest updates of what's coming in Cloud App Security, some of the preview features, might talk a little roadmap, what are some of the new in-session controls, and what's going into public preview. Don't miss this chance, right? This is some of the key leaders in the cloud app security space. I want you to be able to come and hear from them. So again, all 4 of these things I just described to you will be posted on the Yammer group shortly after our call today officially. So that'll be your chance to sign up and register for those. Speaking of which, all the slides that I give you today are going to be posted to the Yammer group here, and I'll post the link into your chat window here in just a moment. Just a reminder, next month, our community topic is going to be on Azure AD Connect. As you'll see here with the new Intune pieces today, a lot of that relies heavily on Azure Active Directory and the groups features, and so we want to make sure that we're connected all the way back to our on-premises Active Directory as well. So we're going to spend some time focusing on Azure AD Connect. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Suzanne Grant is part of our customer experience team in engineering, and she focuses primarily on the Intune experience. And so Suzanne is going to come and talk a little bit about Intune on the Azure portal. And actually, she's going to do something unique for Microsoft. She's not going to show us any slides. She said, I just want to do demos. So now is your chance to see some great demos of that. Suzanne, the floor is yours. Thanks for coming.
Perfect. Thanks for the intro. Can you hear me and see my desktop? Just want to check that first.
Loud and clear on both accounts.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to come today. I'm excited to show you guys the great work that's coming from an Intune perspective and docking into the Azure portal. My goal today is to provide you with a basic tour of the Intune portal on Azure. Some of you may have heard of it termed or referred to as Ibiza. It's one and the same. It's our internal code name of basically taking Intune and docking into the Microsoft Azure Ibiza portal. Not knowing the state of everyone's knowledge or information on the portal, I thought I'd take a general view of it, and obviously if there are questions, throw them in the chat window, and like Nick said, if there's so many, we can certainly follow back up offline, but definitely want to give you kind of a broad brush stroke. There's a lot of investment going on in the portal as we move from the Silverlight portal into the Ibiza Azure portal. And one thing I'd also just clarify from the get-go is, from a dates perspective, the Intune portal on Azure is currently in public preview. What that means is there's still work going on as we move things into this portal. And their features are being rolled out fairly regularly, so I'll probably showcase a couple things that, hey, this is coming soon. It's a definite work in progress as we go through the preview cycle. If you haven't already, and you want to see this experience for yourself after this demo, take out a trial. Take out the latest trial. It will be this experience that I'm going to walk you through today. So all trials that are initiated or provisioned today for Intune are this exact Azure portal experience. And then just from an existing customer perspective, I thought I'd also clarify that migrations to this portal for any of your existing customers is in progress. And we're doing it in kind of a staged rollout. So customers are getting flighted in based on where their tenant is, based on the service infrastructure. And so over the next 2 to 3 months, we will be migrating all of the existing customers from Silverlight into this new experience. And your customers are notified through the service health dashboard and the service notifications. So they'll be receiving information prior to the migration, but that again is on a rolling basis based on where their tenant sits in the infrastructure. last thing on that is I would also clarify during the migration, they do get a side-by-side experience because obviously I just said we don't have all the functionality in preview yet. Again, it continues to roll out. But one thing that you'll see they'll get is the Silverlight experience full functionality as it exists there. They can go to that and see the information side by side with the Azure. Once they're on the Azure portal, they can still see what's happening on the Silverlight portal simultaneously. So that just kind of level sets what I'm trying to do today. Also gives you kind of some context on dates and where we're at with this. If there's no immediate questions popping up on your side, Nick, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo itself.
No questions so far, but just a reminder for folks, if you have them, in the chat window in the lower left-hand corner of your browser is where you can submit them.
Perfect. So let's jump into it. So what you see on the screen now, and I don't know how many people have seen this, whether from an Intune perspective or just Azure specifically, but this is the Azure portal, and it's a hub under which numerous resource extensions are being managed. One of the great highlights that I get to share with you today is from an EMS perspective, you're starting to see the ability to manage all of EMS in one portal, providing the administrators with the versatility and the integration with one place. Nick, you mentioned earlier Azure Active Directory. Now, as we look at, and we'll talk a little bit more about the groups piece, but I can come in here, I can manage my dashboard. So what you see is I've customized my dashboard with the top resources I need to manage. So I've got Intune, Azure Active Directory, I've got Azure Information Protection. I can put those kind of dynamically, pin them on my dashboard. I can pull in other things from the left-hand side as well. And for those that are looking for Intune, if you pull a trial, you can come in here and search and find your specific. So I'll just type in Intune. I've flagged them. They are in preview, so I've flagged the ones that I wanted so that they show up in this short list on the left-hand side. But you can also, as I've done here, pin those specifically to the dashboard. So now as I navigate into the specific Intune service blade, what you're going to see is all the mobile device and app management workloads that you know and love from Silverlight, just configured and implemented into the new portal. A key thing that I'd call out just from an extensibility perspective and management of these from a Microsoft proper side is each of these kind of boxes or workloads that you see are implemented as separate workloads or as separate extensions. And what's important from that is it allows the feature teams to iterate independently, which allows us to move a little bit more nimbly as we want to make investments to the feature set and to drive faster changes that our customers and partners are asking us for. So that's a big win for us in terms of the extensibility and what we can do as we, manage and evolve the service over time. So let me orient you a little bit to the specific Intune service blade. Again, you see the standard workload you're familiar with from Silverlight. One thing we did try to do was optimize how we group these as well as kind of standardize the sections within each workload. So as I click on, let's say, Manage Apps, what you'll see is I expand that and I can slide the blade over to the left. And what you see is we've kind of standardize how the sections, each of these sections or workloads show up. So you've got this overview section, you've got the manage section, which is an overview standard concept is it provides you what you can do within this workload. It gives you summary level information. Manage, that's where you kind of go in and you say, for this particular workload, I'm going to go do and interact with the entities of creating and configuring information. Monitor is by workload, we're working through what are the proper reports and information that we can surface. And so each workload will have unique customized monitoring reporting that's populated relative to the specific workload. And then setup, you can think about that as kind of things related to the particular workload that need to happen on almost a one-time basis, but initial setup that enables all the other pieces to work. So setting up Windows Store for Business, company portal branding, those kind of things. Those are kind of one-time setup things that then you build your workloads around once those are completed. And then obviously at the bottom you've got your standard help and support information that pops up and gives you workload-specific support information. So as we go through the blades today, you'll see that's a consistent look and feel that we've tried to apply and intend to apply across all of these various workloads. The other thing I'll call out just briefly is, one, you've got the, like I said, you can do side by side, especially in this preview phase. There will be a time when it phased out, but I could actually open Classic Intune Portal, so it'd bring up my Silverlight experience. And then we've also exposed within here, we talked about groups and users. That is something we've exposed, even though as we move to the Microsoft Azure portal, groups and the underlying infrastructure, we're moving from what was historically Silverlight Intune specific groups. We're migrating that into the Azure Active Directory. So legacy is moving into Azure Active Directory groups. We're also exposing within the Intune blade the ability to manage users, which the way it's structured, it's really an Azure Active Directory, but for simplicity, we're also exposing that here within the Intune, even though that may be a specific Azure Active Directory workload. All right, so with that, one of the reasons we've done the configuration and grouping like this is, yes, it looks cleaner, but another important piece of this is if I drill into access control, think about this as your role-based access to administer the service. One of the key things we've been able to do, and as it pulls up, it's going to show us the 4 standard built-in roles. And Dave Randall, who's on the call, owns this space, so feel free to chime in along the way if you need be. But one of the things that is a great improvement as we move to this portal is the ability to add custom roles. So in adding custom roles, and why it's important that we've optimized how we've structured the workloads themselves, is because I can come in here and say app only type permissions, and I can set up specific permissions that will only allow, and you can see the different, like I wouldn't want to give anyone device configurations. I'd want them only to have specific manage of apps functionality. And so I can specifically configure and toggle what I want this person to have as part of, so I'll give them, yes, I want them to assign, I'll give them all the app functionality and none of the others. So I'm not giving them ability to do any of the other stuff. And what that allows us to do is empower you guys where you may want to, or your customers may want to have, sorry, it's saving, there we go, may want to have specific targeted functionality. You no longer have to have one size fits all with what we've contrived in terms of our built-in roles. You can manage it a bit more effectively for your needs and isolate. And that's again why the kind of configuration of our workloads is so important, the way we've broken it down. So now I'm going to go into the manage users, and I'm going to just keep rolling through, Nick. If there's questions, feel free to pop me in, kind of going section by section. But if there are questions along the way we need to stop for, just break in.
Sounds good.
All right. So if I go into the manage users, I talked a little bit about the Azure Active Directory transition. In this single portal, we've now exposed it, and you can start to see how we're looking at, we're now actually in Azure Active Directory, but hosted or surfaced through Intune. Again, giving you that in one portal, that seamless maneuvering across the workloads, because in Intune we're obviously heavily dependent on the groups and the user functionality that's managed in Azure Active Directory. So within this blade, you can obviously come through, create different seer groups, manage the users, manage password resets, all those standard functionalities that you've expected before. Adding groups, all kind of designed in a way to make it user-friendly, administrator-friendly to come in here and simply manage information. You can do assigned groups, you can do it by dynamic device information, dynamic user, so it auto-populates, or you can specifically assign them. So a lot of good functionality as we migrate into this one group infrastructure to rule them all, and we remove some of that duplication that you guys may have experienced with the separate group entities of the past. So I'm going to jump I'm conscious of time too, and I want to save time for Dave. So I'm going to go into apps now. So obviously now we can jump into the apps and the devices space. So from a manage apps perspective, I'll just highlight a couple key things. Again, you'll see the same look and feel of overview, manage, monitor, and setup. That's the consistent piece. And think about this as mobile app management. So all rolled into one, the ability to manage your apps, and some great improvements around the experience of how you go and search and install the apps and then publish those out to groups. So what I've done here is just preloaded a bunch of apps around, be it iOS apps, Android apps, there's a couple Windows apps in there. And what we've done is, think about this as going to get all your modern apps from the stores. You can today search iOS store dynamically and go download the app and the metadata. And the UI that we've exposed here is a lot more friendly compared to the Silverlight, but I will also say that I think Dave later will wow you with the power of automation and how to make this even better through automation, just because of the design of what's been put in place. So I can go and say search for Microsoft in the store, and what you see is all of the store pieces or all the Microsoft apps show up, and you can say, oh, I want to pull in Microsoft Groove, for example. And I'm going to go pull that in, and I can actually configure the app information directly from here and put all my app information if I wanted to modify it or anything. But the cool thing is, with iOS specifically, we're able to pull all that metadata in. Windows search is a work in progress to do the equivalent, and unfortunately, Google, and somewhat ironically, doesn't expose their search. It's not possible today, but you can still go and pull that information in. And again, through automation, you can do that once and automate it so that you, with the APIs that are exposed, so you don't have to do that regularly. So you can go through, configure it, and then at the end of it, you actually can directly assign that app from the interface. So let's go through OneDrive real quick and say, I actually want to go and see the information associated with that app. What are, if I want to manage the properties, see what those are. So once I've actually got them in, I can adjust the configurations once I pulled them in. And I can also just directly assign that to who I want to give this to. So in this case, I'm going to give OneDrive. I can specify the groups that I want to assign the app to in terms of who's entitled to use it or otherwise. And so I can sign it by name, or I can select the groups that I want to actually assign or associate that app to with the select configuration policies I've designated. So I'm going to go back, and the other thing I'll just quickly highlight, licensed apps. Think about this as when you have managed volume license apps from Store for Business, iOS VPP, Android for Work. You'll see those synced apps here, the license consume, those kind of things. I don't happen to have any, but that's what licensed apps will show you. Again, app configuration policies, this is where you can actually, beyond the apps tab above, you can go configure and add specific app config policies. Again, all similar functionality you've seen before in Silverlight, just with a more unified and I'll say seamless blade infrastructure that allows you to manage that through the system, through the UI. App protection policies, all the same kind of concepts that you know and love from Silverlight are embedded in what we do here in this portal. Again, I don't have policies today, but the same concept. You can do the by whichever operating system, which apps you want to require, what settings you want to apply to it. So all the same functionality that you've had before, just with a more seamless UI to manage it. So let me jump out of apps real quick. And the breadcrumb trail is nice from a navigation perspective at the top. So I can go back to the Intune dashboard simply by using the breadcrumb trail at the top. Let's jump over to devices because I'm cognizant on time. And so let me go through what I'll say is, let's start with enroll devices. So enroll devices is an area under development. Remember, we talked about that preview concept. So this is definitely something, but as a separate workload, is kind of being moved forward independently. But think about this as being able to manage your configurations for the different operating systems of how and what to enroll. Windows Hello for Business, being able to configure that. The specific terms and conditions you want to set as a customer, you can come in here and actually say, let me go create those, and put whatever text and conditional constraints around it you want. Same thing with enrollment restrictions. One of the key things I would say about enrollment restrictions, if I click on, I didn't want device limit, I wanted this one. So I can actually come in to enrollment restrictions and within the platform and the platform configurations, set what I want to allow and what I don't, and then also what I see the compliance, quickly jump over to where the compliance policies are and what options I have to set. So just a lot more seamless integration. And the last piece I'd highlight here is corporate device identifiers. So a lot of great work around IMEI and being able to simply add based on the file, so import the identifiers. So let's say you have the CSV file that has the device identifiers, the unique associated information with it. You can simply come in here, navigate to it, and upload that file so your devices are added in bulk through the portal. So that's device enrollment. The next place I was going to jump to was being able to configure the devices. So configure devices, same look and feel. You can see in the intent of the overview, just spend a minute there, is what can you do in here? Sometimes the label may seem different if you apply it in one way, but the concept is you can do these things within this device configuration area. So profiles, I can go through and say, what are my profiles? So here I've got a Windows Phone 10 profile created. That's what I've labeled it. And you can come in here and see what properties I've associated. And what you can see is I've got 9 settings configured. So if I click on that, these are OS-specific configuration settings. And what I really like about the UI now is being able to say, there were 4 settings, I've only configured one of those. 2 of the 9 I've configured. So you can kind of see how many, they're grouped fairly logically that you can say, oh, I want to go look at passwords specifically. So instead of a kind of a running laundry list, you actually have some improved navigation of what I'm wanting to configure, and then a quick readout of how many of the settings specific to this OS I've actually configured. So it's a nice quick glance from an administrative perspective way to kind of manage. And then let me go back here, and you can obviously create profiles based on platform. Let's select iOS. What type of configuration? Do I want device restrictions across the board, VPN? So you can come in here and do those explicitly. And again, Dave will show some pretty cool automation functionality where you could get a baseline package of what you want and have this be an automated way in which you roll out kind of a baseline structure of what policies you want to set for customer type A. The last thing I'll show you here is telecom expense management. So this is a new functionality that we're adding in, and it's really cool. So if you think about, we're partnering with a couple key telecoms, and this piece is allowing you to, it's a new functionality allowing you to set constraints to block cellular or roaming data on devices that exceed usage quotas that you configure. So you can come in here and say, let's enable this. Here's the service providers that we're connected to. And what we basically do is say quota equals X, enforcement equals Y. And what that allows you to do is based on the usage of that device, say it's a corporate device and you want to restrict how much they're able to roam or not roam at all because corporate is footing the bill for it. You can actually control that now through Intune for the telecom service providers that we've connected to, and that list is growing over time. So with time, am I doing okay on time? Do I have time to do one more?
Yep. Yeah, you got about 2 minutes left.
Okay. So set device compliance is what you'd expect it to be. Device compliance restrictions based on OS. And what's really cool about this, you're seeing the same look and feel, so I'm not going to repeat that too much, even though I think it's really cool. What you're able to do with the policies, again, is configure this one is really focused on the health of the device. So what what state of the device do you expect, and what are those settings? So similar look and feel, but what's my device health? What's jailbroken devices? What do I want to do with those? Mobile threat protection, what's that look like? And you can set your specific constraints of what you want the policy to be, and then build the enforcement rules behind that. So it's with conditional access and others. So what are the OS requirements to connect? Because you don't want something that's no longer supported by one of the service providers. It allows you to set those constraints just like you would before. And again, that same look and feel allows you to manage it in a way that is a lot more seamless. The last piece, which is really under development, so I'm not going to spend much time there at all, if I go back to Intune, is conditional access. So again, we're surfacing this ability to specify a set of conditions and then set the enforcement constraints you defined. This also is enabling our Exchange Active Sync to on-premise connector as a starting point, and so it kind of rounds out that full exposure of starting to see EMS all under one. I'm going to pause, assume I've covered enough in a whirlwind tour of Intune on the Azure portal. Any burning questions, Nick, that I should address?
Yeah, there were a couple just quick questions. We've been furiously answering them on the back end here too, which is great. Probably as far as like Office 365 customers who get some of that Intune functionality, will they also use this portal, or will there be something that shows up on the O365 side?
So there'll be connectors, and Dave, feel free to jump in at any time, but there'll be connectors. The O365 portal will be more of the license pieces, but to configure mobile device and application management, you'll come to the Azure portal.
Okay, great. And then what about reporting? You know, for especially, I think the question was around man without enrollment, right? That's the reporting story there hasn't been super strong. But how is reporting going to change with all this? Reporting is going to be,
there's big investments around reporting. That is, I'll say, under development, but the intent is that it all starts to surface in here. So if you start to see the monitor section and just in the overview sections, I think it was in the devices and groups. I didn't spend much time there, but the intent is that it's all surfaced by workload within, and we want to provide richer reporting than before. And with the API structure that Dave's going to talk about, we're more enabled to do that. And what's really cool is partners and customers are enabled to do that themselves as well. So we're going to have a lot more investment show up in the portal in the coming month or so that shows the breakout of reports by workload. But there's also big investments from an API perspective that you guys can kind of be in your own control and control your own destiny with the API calls directly into Power BI.
All right, fantastic. Suzanne, thank you. If you can hang on the background a little bit, we may have some more questions that come in via chat, and we can handle them that way. But with that, I am going to introduce the audience to Dave Randall. I got to meet Dave just a couple weeks ago for the first time, and it was one of the best hours of my week, literally. So Dave is a senior PM on our Intune engineering team, and he's actually accountable for the whole automation story. So as a partners, automation is super important to your business, and so we thought it'd be great to have Dave come on and cover a little bit of what's going to be happening in the automation space. So Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to kick things off.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Nick. So there was one question which I'll leave this screen up here that Suzanne was on, which is how do you do multi-tenant management within the console? Is there a way to, for example, pin all of the customers on a central dashboard? And the way this will work is the Partner Administration Center is your central list of all of the customers that you're managing, and we will have Intune-specific links for each of your customers that will launch you off into the Azure portal or the Silverlight console, depending on where your customers are in their migration process, so that you can launch in the context of that particular customer and do your administration in the portal. So the Partner Administration Center will have that directory, and then there'll be specific links for you to launch into the Azure portal for each of your customers. So that's how we'll that's how we'll address the multi-tenant configuration. Now, there's some other ways that we can do it from an automation perspective. So I'll cover those as we go through the slides. So Nick stole my slideware thunder earlier on, so I'm going to do a little bit of slideware for you, and then I'll also spend a little bit of time doing some demos. So I want to talk about Microsoft Graph, which is the underlying automation infrastructure for Intune. We'll talk about some Intune data that you can automate, and then we'll talk about how to tie both of those together. So the Microsoft Graph is just a single endpoint that allows all of the different online services to expose their information. And from that exposure, we can do two basic things. We can automate, and we can get access to information. At the bottom of this chart, you'll see there's a variety of different data sources that are available for you to query via Graph. So you'll notice a lot of those look very Office related, users and groups and file and mail and calendars. And in addition to the Office 365 data, we also have Azure Active Directory data, Azure Information Protection, Intune. All of those sit behind the Graph interface layer and expose their information for you to access and automate against. At the next layer up, we use primarily OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 to do all of our authentication and authorization. And Graph supports a variety of different development environments. So depending on whether you or your customers are building applications for doing automation in any different language, they can use those different development environments to build applications, whether they're for Mac or iOS or Android or Windows. And at the very top level, depending on the preference that you have for a specific language, if it's PowerShell or you're building .NET or HTML apps, whatever it may be, all of those can call into Graph equally well. So as I had mentioned earlier, accessing and automating the Intune service via RESTful API is really the goal behind the whole Graph API, in addition to the other online services. So I'm going to get a little bit geeky here, and bear with me, because once we get over to the demo part, this will be some good background for you. So when you use Graph to query information out of Intune, the first thing that you're going to have is a static URL, and that's going to form the foundation of your call. And this is the same for all services in Graph. Then you're going to have a version. That version right now is either 1.0 or beta, and all of the Intune things are under the beta version, so we'll see what that looks like. And then there's a specific resource that you're going to query information about. So in the UI that Suzanne was showing, we had things like configuration policy for VPN or Wi-Fi profiles, or we had compliance policy, or we had a list of devices that are being managed by Intune, or the Azure Active Directory users. All of those are the types of resources that we can query on. And then rather than just getting back a list of maybe all 5,000 some odd users in an organization, we can also put some query parameters on that and just retrieve specific information depending on your scenario. To go one level deeper in terms of kind of the details of your Graph queries, the information that you get back or that you put in to the Graph API is going to be in a JSON format. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a name, a colon, and a value. And if you are asking for information from Graph, it'll return back in this format, so you always know exactly what the information is that you're retrieving. You'll have a basic description or the name of the field plus the value itself. So when you're querying Intune, the types of information that you can get and the type of automation that you can perform against it is all of these items on the left. You can get your app protection policies, or you can get information about the mobile applications that have been added to Intune. You can perform device actions. If you have, for example, a remote wipe, and you want to be able to programmatically call a remote wipe for a specific device because an employee has left the company and you want to make sure that all the company data is gone from that device, you can call that programmatically. Or Suzanne mentioned a little bit about telecom expense policies. You can set up and configure the telecom expense management policies. Everything that Suzanne showed in the Azure portal is automatable. Now it turns out that for the most part you're going to need to tie that with information from Azure Active Directory. So in addition to the Intune data that we have available, Azure Active Directory also makes that data available as users, user groups, devices, and device groups, and oftentimes tying those together in a report or a query will really bring much more meaning to the data that you're returning back from Graph. So what I wanted to do now is switch over and do a little bit of demo. And I see that there's at least one or two questions here, so I'll pause and answer a couple of questions. So the first one is, are you planning to create PowerShell module with commandlets to manage Intune aspects? The answer is yes, that's in our roadmap to develop a PowerShell module, native one for Intune, so we will eventually have that. In the meantime, you can use the invoke-rest method commandlet to perform any of the actions that are available by the REST APIs today. Next question is, the default graph filter will return only 100 rows. How do we specify filters to return all rows? And this actually for Intune depends on the workload. We have paging, and so the paging will be defined for each of the graph calls. Some will return larger sets of data than just 100 rows at a time, but that'll be in the documentation. So let me bring over my console so that you all can see. I've got the same Azure portal that Suzanne had showed earlier, and if, for example, I go to my Manage Users, we'll get a list of all of the Azure Active Directory users that are associated with this particular tenant. If I select my users, you'll see the list here. And that's kind of interesting, but we want to do this programmatically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the Microsoft Graph Explorer, and this is a great place for you to just try things out with Graph, understand exactly what the data is that you can get back. You can couple the documentation for Intune with the Graph Explorer to really figure out exactly all the different things that you can do. But I'm going to start out with a basic one here. I'll just hit go on me, and it's going to show some information about my logged on account. Now, it looks like I got signed out, so I'm going to go ahead and sign myself back in here. Sorry for the awkward silence here as I make sure that I type my password correctly. All right. Let me go and I'll just do this same query for me, which is, here's my admin at emsoxd1.onmicrosoft.com, who I just logged in as. And so that's some basic information about me. Now, it turns out that there's actually an updated version of me that's in beta. So if I change this to beta, notice now my version is changed, and here's the entity that I'm going to go get information about. I select go, and now I've got much more information about the assigned licenses for me. I've got a lot more detail about my specific account. So you'll see that the Azure Active Directory team is expanding their information and have made that available in a preview format. So it's kind of interesting, but let's tie together Azure Active Directory and Intune. So I'm going to paste in a URL here, which is, again, the me, which is my current logged on user, but I'm going to attach to that owned devices. So these are devices that have been enrolled by me under this particular account. So when I go select owned devices and run that query, wait for a little bit. Nick, I think we need to feed the gerbils a little bit more food. They're not running fast enough in the back end.
You know, I can do my best. I don't know if I have gerbil food in the budget this year.
Suzanne, do you have any gerbil food? They're running really slow today.
Can't say that I do.
Okay. All right. That's not coming back quickly enough, and I want to make sure that we've got time for a couple other queries. So if we get a chance, we'll get back to that. But the next thing that I want to show is applications. So Suzanne had mentioned all the different mobile applications that are available, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a query that is my mobile apps. And if I query on mobile apps, then we'll see we've got here is Words with Friends Classic, because all of our employees need to keep up on their vocabulary, Skype for Business, PowerPoint. So we've returned a list of all the applications that are associated with this Intune account. And if I go over to if I go over to the Azure portal, go to Manage Apps, my list of apps, you'll see exactly the same list here in Azure portal as what we have in Graph Explorer. So that's great. I can go retrieve that same list. If I wanted to create a new application, I could do that. But in fact, probably doing it from an automated perspective using PowerShell is a little bit more powerful. And even though I could create one automatically, I really would rather create more than one at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. And this is just the standard Azure Active Directory authentication libraries that are popping up from my PowerShell script. And once I get logged in, I've got here just a simple little menu of some PowerShell scripts. We'll make these available on the public GitHub, so you'll be able to download these scripts and run them and try them out for yourself and understand exactly what's necessary for doing the authentication piece plus your querying. And at this point, I'd like to pause and go back to the multi-tenant question. So a lot of times partners are asking, how do I manage across multiple tenants? And by using PowerShell and iterating from tenant to tenant, you can apply, let's say, for example, the same compliance policy across multiple tenants. So you've got just a bit of JSON text that represents your policy, and you can apply that to one tenant, log out from the first tenant, log into the second, apply it, and so forth. And that makes it fairly straightforward. It's a little rudimentary, but it's straightforward to go between each of the different tenants that you want to manage and go push a standard compliance policy or configuration policy. So that's one way that partners are solving. I'll put multi-tenant management in quotes there because you are managing across multiple tenants, but that's a great way to leverage automation. So I'm going to go take a look at where, let's see, we wanted to automate our apps. So I've got a script here that is going to go connect to the iTunes store. It's going to grab a couple of applications and it's going to go add them into my Intune tenant. So in order for us to see this a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and sort by my type, if I can. I have, let's see, I don't have my sort key up at the top. So I've got one iOS store app here, Words with Friends Classic. And that's the only one that's indicated as an iOS store app. Otherwise, they're all managed. So let me pull back my script. We'll go ahead and run that. And my PowerShell script, as I said, will go out to the iTunes store. And it'll come back and it'll give me an error, which I wasn't expecting. But let's see whether or not we have something in back in the UI. So I'm going to go refresh this. My guess is probably not. So I have slow gerbils, and I need a gimme on a red error, Nick. Do you have gimmies?
I'm all out.
All right. So my apologies for the error on that. Probably I was getting a timeout in the same way that we were seeing a timeout in the other one. But let me say that the script will go through, retrieve all of the applications that we have listed. In this case, I had 4, and go push those into Intune. And then they would just show up here in our list. So let's take a look at a few of the other things that we can do from an automation perspective. I'll go back to Intune, and we'll go to access control. Now, Suzanne showed a list of RBAC roles, and I've also got a PowerShell script that will retrieve all of my RBAC roles. So if we run this, this will go query for a list of all of my RBAC roles. So I've got side by side, I've got my news, super, and very limited help desk operator over in the console, and then I've also got that listed here that came back from Graph. So as I mentioned, this PowerShell script that I'm running is wrapping the Graph API call that just the same as what we were doing in Graph Explorer. Now, if I wanted to go do the list of roles in Graph Explorer, just to show you the 3 different ways of performing the same operation, I'll go ahead and paste in my role definitions query. We'll click go on that. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see my new super limited help desk operator and my new super and very limited help desk operator. And those are exactly the same as what we saw over here in PowerShell, as well exactly the same list of roles as what we see in the console. So 3 different easy ways to use the basic building blocks of all of the data that's exposed in the Azure portal to either do some simple one-by-one operations in Graph Explorer or use PowerShell to automate that. Now, there's a couple of blogs actually that have been posted on using some of the Graph APIs for automating Intune. There's one of them that was available back in November of last year that talks about getting compliance information. There's another one that shows how to connect Power BI with Intune data. That's a great one, especially for those of you who are interested in doing some custom reports. And there's another one that has to do with how to accomplish the authentication piece using PowerShell. So what I'll make sure is that Nick has got all of those available to share on Yammer so that you have those specific links, because I know you're going to want to go build some PowerShell, and the authentication piece isn't very obvious from the Graph documentation. So you're going to want a little bit of this guidance that's out there. That's exactly the same guidance that we used in building our PowerShell scripts. So that's what I've got for demo. I hope you have a good idea of the breadth of capability between what you see in all of the new features that are showing up in Azure Portal, plus the features that are being ported over as the foundation for all of the automation that you can do, plus some just some quick, basic, easy ways of automating some tasks using the Graph API and PowerShell and any of the other languages or scripting capabilities that are supported by Graph. All of those can be used in your application development as you're supporting your customers. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I'll take a look at the questions.
Yes, so Dave, a couple of the big picture questions.
Sure.
Hopefully your building's not on fire, by the way.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Just be safe. But second of all, the scripts you mentioned on GitHub, what are the keywords on GitHub that we should be searching for to find those scripts?
Microsoft Graph.
Okay, just
All
right
one
under the
word.
Microsoft Graph. Perfect.
Yeah.
And then as far as this whole portal, obviously we saw some of the beta jump up and get us today, I think, with that one demo. But I have seen that demo work. It's fantastic. So partners, you're going to want to be able to show that to your customers because it's really cool. When do we expect sort of that full transition out of beta to saying, yeah, this whole thing's GA?
So certainly in the first half of this year, we should see the full completion of migration and GA of the Azure portal. It turns out that the Graph API SDK, which is what the Intune team publishes into, is supported by our Azure portal in both a beta form and a final release form. So ideally, we are shipping both the Graph API SDK for Intune at the same time as the Azure portal is being GA'd. There may be a month or two difference between those, but in terms of the functionality, all of that should be available by the end of the first half of this year.
All right, fantastic. We've had a ton of questions that have come in over the course of the hour. I think we've answered most of them through the chat window. But I know we talked about some resources. We talked about GitHub. We talked about the blogs that you mentioned. I know, folks, if you're interested in building out your own demo tenant, we've done some demos blogs already, and we talked about those in previous calls. So I will repost those to the Yammer group today. So if you want to set up a demo tenant, you'll be able to. I set a new one up last week, and I can confirm it did come with all the new bells and whistles that we've talked about today. So it's a great little feature to get in there and test out. But hopefully you go away from this as we close as partners getting a sense that, yeah, we're making huge investments in Intune to make it easier for you, for your customers. But hopefully as partners, you're starting to see some of the possibility now that we've opened up this, sort of scripted management and automated management opportunity to say, yeah, I think I can start doing some of that and build repeatable IP that I can use with my customers, right? That's really the intent of what we're trying to deliver to you as partners. So great opportunity for you when you combine that up with CSP and some of the other things as well. That is, unfortunately, all the time we have for today, folks. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to our speakers, Suzanne and Dave. We will be live and in person on the Yammer groups throughout the days ahead. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us there. Thank you. We will see you on next month's call, if not sooner. Have a great day, everybody.